on this document, your comments and everything. Um, your comments may not look the same color as maybe what you wrote in originally because some of the colors were so close together, and one was yellow, which I could not see at all. I changed the colors a little bit, so don't be surprised if you had a close relationship with that particular color and it's not there anymore. I hope I don't hurt your feelings. Um, so what I did was when I started reading all of these again, there's a lot of stuff spread out throughout all of them, regardless of what answer it might have been to a specific question or whatever. So I took the content of what the responses were and put them together so that hopefully we've got about 8 categories, I think, of comments that are hopefully somewhat homogeneous in their presentation. And then we are now, and I'm sorry that I know this is going to drive some of y'all crazy. We're at the slogging through the quicksand part where we've got to kind of go through each of these recommendations in some way, shape, or form and figure out what we want to make top of the pile. Not lose any of what we've already stated. Don't lose what's already here. We're not going to delete anything yet, but we've got to decide what is at the top of the pinnacle and then work down from that so that we've got the most important 2 or 3 items under these categories or others if you want to restate them. And then go from there. Nina, did you raise your hand or were you scratching your head? I couldn't tell. And you're on mute.
I did not do any voting yet because
okay. That's okay.
I would like to say that in thinking about how we prioritize these things, it seems to me that we have some pretty clear categories. We have categories around clarification of mission. We have recommendations around standards and procedures. We have recommendations around structure and communication. And we have recommendations around recruiting and support. And I think
that's pretty much how I've divided them. Maybe not exactly, but that's the highlights that I've hit upon.
If we start with the very highest level considerations, what recommendations do we think will get us the most bang for the buck, as it were? Which are the ones with which, if they were implemented properly and swiftly, would most transform the functionality and usefulness and effectiveness of boards? And think about it as gain of function. What can we do? What can we recommend that, if properly implemented, of course, the devil is in the details, of course, would make serving on a board more rewarding, would make the mission of the board more likely to succeed, and would best move forward city council's goals for the city. So rather than kind of getting into the, for me, rather than getting into the weeds to start with about which wording we want to use or which of 2 very similar things we want to emphasize, I think the most important thing that we can do is decide which recommendations will be most effective in improving the experience and the missions of the boards.
Okay, so Nina, I don't think I said anything about wordsmithing. I said, I think we're only going to talk about what are our most top recommendations that we want to get through and try to figure out what those are. And then we will figure out what the secondary ones are. And then we will get into wordsmithing. I don't want to get into any wordsmithing until we have a set of recommendations, because I don't want a wordsmithed recommendation that's going to be thrown out 3 weeks from now after we've spent, you know,
I'm not arguing with you about that.
all right. Okay, so we're just talking about recommendations and what we think is most important. What we also have to remember is that Sarah has, my Friday was Sarah's last day. They just posted the new job description, or the job description opening this past week. So it's going to be a while before they get someone to fulfill her place. And Maggie Maggie herself would really love to take on boards and commissions, but I'm not sure that that's actually going to be what happens, because she loved working with boards and commissions, and she said that Sarah loved working with boards and commissions. What I find interesting is that the board members don't realize that Sarah was really your point person. They all went to their staff liaison, which, again, shows a crack in the training of the board members. But be that as it may, we've got an opportunity. The boards and commissions committee committee is waiting for these recommendations before they make any of their changes. Right now, hey, Elise, right now, all council is thinking about, and hey, Jay, is the budget, because the budget must get approved by May 27th, I think. So, that's kind of where they are at this moment. But, all we want to try to do is let's try to get our top of the mountain recommendations. And if we have time tonight, maybe some ones that cascade underneath those. But no, I don't want to get into a lot of wordsmithing tonight until we see the whole package. Are there any other comments before we get started? Or any other recommendations, changes, ideas?
I just wanted to ask, I know that there's some of us that have voted throughout the document and other people that haven't yet, myself included. I'm just wondering what process, if we could clarify the process we're going to follow tonight. And
if you want to go ahead and vote on a particular recommendation, feel free to do so. I understand from Patrick, if you pull up this document on your own computer, it will show up here as we are talking as to your vote.
That's correct.
Patrick's just given you a link. And so feel free to do that. Hold on, I'm going to try to pull that up myself. And oh, I lost you guys. Okay. And then we can, any comments you want to make tonight, feel free to do so. If you've got a particular recommendation after you've read through this that you feel is really important, now is the time to throw it out. I did this with 7 or 8 categories based on how the comments and recommendations were kind of worded. They sort of glommed into each other, but that's not set in stone yet either. So if we want to change some of those categories and move the recommendations to other segments, that's perfectly fine. But what I'd like to try to do is get at least come out of tonight's meeting with our top 7 to 10 recommendations. So, Patrick, do you see Jack's change to that one comment?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Because I added it
Right.
under
Okay, you
number
did
2.
already? Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first one, and the numbers to the far left, I've got the original document that I started from, and every one of your comments has a number. So as we start moving these, if we're going to be able to in Google, I'll be, and you're worried that that one of your comments got lost and you can't remember what it was exactly. I have the original document, and we'll be able to go back and footnote that or something, so we don't lose. We're not going to lose what you've. If we start doing a lot of moving of chunks of information around.
And
Now,
Casey, before we dive in, I just wanted to say Ted has his hand raised.
oh, I'm so sorry, Ted. I'm your name actually covers your whole face. So yes, what can I do for you?
I did the
Right.
hand raise on the tablet too.
Oh, see, there you go.
Yeah. But yeah, I wanted to say I have voted, and I am like, I really think that the voting process and the numerical data aspect of it is the way to discuss this and make these decisions. But I am very concerned that there are a number of people who have not voted yet, and that they be given, that we need to move through the process in a way that they be given sufficient time to actually do their voting numerically, and so that we have, at the end of the process, we have sort of a, everybody participating in full scope. I think that might be able to be done, but I think it's going to be a little difficult to do that.
Are you okay? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3. So 3 people have not voted, and I am not going to vote. So 7 people and 5 have voted. Elise has weighed in. Patrick, who hasn't weighed in? Jay and Nina.
Yeah, I've lost track of these documents, and I actually went through the summary documents and
Jay,
added a bunch of
I
comments.
can't imagine how that could happen. This has been so clear and
So, and I clearly did that after they were extracted to here, because the stuff that I put in is not here. So, I mean, I don't want to hold up this process for me to go through another document.
okay.
I think.
Can you send me that document, and I'll try to incorporate your comments.
I mean, I'm late to the party here. I don't think
that's okay. That's all right. Alan, what's happening?
Just a quick comment. I don't mean to be critical, but the process was clearly laid out. And although the documents seem to change a little bit, the Google site was always the same we could go to. I had no problem going to the site. It was laid out by Patrick's email as well as yours. And I don't know how we can continue to delay this. I think we've had the majority of people weighing in, and Jay can certainly cast his vote tonight, which would add one more vote to the list and give us 6 names. So anybody who hasn't voted, and I think everybody but Jay has voted on, and Nina, I could see them weighing in tonight without taking too much time on any item, but just say they're supporting this, knowing that there's a limited number of items, as you laid out initially, Stacy, that on how many items you could vote on, which was set at 30.
Right, since we had 60 kind of statements. Some of them were really more statements or that sort of thing. Nina, when you say you haven't voted, you have commented and you have read through these. So in a way,
I don't need to vote. My role really here is, I have never served on a board. I have tons of opinions about just about everything, but I think of my role more as being the voice for accountability and transparency and citizen participation in the most efficient way possible, just in general. So those are the things that I tend to focus on, and I'm happy to chime in around those issues. But I don't feel that I need to put my thumb on the scale at this stage, really.
okay.
That could change, but
So is JDH, that's you, Jack, right? You're JDH? Okay. So Jay, if you download that link Patrick put up in the chat and put it onto your computer.
Yeah, I'm on. I have it up, but I put all my comments in the old version.
Okay. But you can at least vote and let us know. Just put your initials over here in the far left column and just let us know if we're an up or a down. So
does
in
anybody
this,
know why I have two images for Jack that are identical?
you mean like pictures? You're
Yeah, I've got Jack in two windows. Does anyone know why that's happening?
No, sometimes Google
because
Meet
his
does weird
personality
things.
is overwhelming and it can't hold in one picture frame.
It can't possibly be contained.
Oh, that's interesting. Elise.
I was just wondering, I went through and I added some notes on the side for things that were very similar. If we could combine those together and then pool the votes together for those things, and then maybe like there were some places where I ended up casting a vote here and casting a vote here, but they were very similar. And so maybe if those were combined, I could move one of those votes somewhere else or be satisfied that I've doubled up on that thing.
I agree with Elise. I found some common areas among the various topics that we had, or areas for voting.
Is that Patrick? Do you know? I can't move the document around, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just say I also think it would be a good use of our time to combine things, if that makes sense.
Right.
And
Right.
I can certainly do that. Yeah, on like live during this meeting. And I would just say to Jay or Nina or myself, I've only put a few votes on here. If while we're going through, you want to add some votes to items, I think that please feel free to do so, because that's what I've been doing while we're talking.
Okay, Jack.
Yeah, I think the combination of some of these is likely appropriate. I would suggest we get started going
Right.
through them and address those combinations as we reach them. We can ask Elise to raise a hand when that occurs.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm hoping we can do. Nina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this table here, and in the third thing where it says that I contributed, clarify the role of staff liaison and have a written code of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really two distinct things. I don't know why I combined them into two, if I did, because they're really not necessarily connected to each other.
Okay. Patrick, give me that editing ability too, just in case. Okay. If you can do 3 people.
We can have as anyone that can pull up this document can edit it. So
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes. Okay.
we used to keep things more locked down, but these documents should be open to everyone.
Okay. So I'm going to just try it here. Let's see. Mhm.
Yes, Alan.
I was going to throw something out on any of these areas that have no votes. Can we just show them as being eliminated so we don't have to read through them?
I don't want to eliminate without a discussion.
Okay.
Just to and then Patrick, on anything that we say to eliminate, just do a strike through so
Yeah.
we don't lose it quite yet. All right, so did that my changes just see my changes? Okay, did I have to do something to the document for those changes to show up?
What did you change?
I split that comment that Nina made. This one right here. Clarify the role of staff liaison. Oh, it
This
didn't
one?
show up.
You edited this item here and you're not seeing it? Are you at the same URL as I am?
Beats the hell out of me, Patrick. I don't know. I'm going to start over.
Yeah, I've connected it. I don't see any changes.
I see, for what it's worth, I see Patrick's highlight on the independent document, which I'm looking at.
So do I.
Yeah, so do I.
That's weird.
Okay.
Let me refresh my screen in case maybe I'm out of sync.
No, I can see
I
what you're
seem to-
doing.
Okay.
Folks, this is the
No.
link.
All right, so okay.
I just put it in the chat. That's where the changes are happening.
Yeah, well,
Like, I'm just adding some bolded text to this item.
I can see it.
see, now darn it. All right, I'm going to try again.
I can see Stacy's changes, I think.
I can't.
It looks like it's the bottom of page 5.
I can't tell which page I'm on.
Yeah.
You kind of have to look at the slider on the right as you
Well,
scroll.
okay. You know what? We're going to do it this way. Okay. We now have 2 comments.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes. All right. So I think so now we're all looking at the same part of the doc. We can see everyone's edits. I think this is real-time collaboration, I think.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So if you go up to that first statement, that's the one that garnered the most votes even before we met tonight. And so I think the main statement there is the centralized staff support, right? That we've all been talking about for 2 years.
Can I just make a process suggestion?
Sure.
I think we could look at these by category and just everyone could say, is there anything we need to consolidate here? If you haven't voted in this section, consider adding some votes. Does that process
Mhm.
work for everyone?
Yes. Hold on. Now, because y'all are on current boards, or because you all are on boards currently, has anyone ever said your point person is the assistant city clerk at your meetings?
Stacy,
When-
just let me say, I am not a serving board member, never have been.
Same.
Okay. So this centralization, even though I've been told that it's centralized, that knowledge has not been shared. So let's just keep that in the back of our head when we start to write the actual recommendation. The I'm looking through the rest of these.
Again, I don't mean to jump in, Stacy, but I think the ones where there's a lot of overlap in this section are these hybrid meeting related ones.
That's what I was just going to say. We don't have any more about centralization. We have maybe the whole thing about written procedures. We've got about a standard operating procedure. We have procedures for tech. We have procedures for public input. So I think that there does need to be an actual operating manual that is shared with all members, but definitely a document that is the framework for the staff liaison and the chair. Nina, just go ahead and just speak out. And trying to look at this document and seeing who's raising their hands. So just speak out.
Okay, so the thing that stands out here for me is there's a lot of different things around training. School of Government, train the trainer, quarterly board member trainings, parliamentary procedure trainings. It seems to me that you can't really do training effectively until those procedures are in place.
Correct.
The procedures and guidelines. The guidelines are how to run a meeting. You need to have that in writing.
Right.
The onboarding needs to be something that people expect to experience. How long is it going to take? How many sessions do they have to attend? Whatever. You know, as for bringing in School of Government, you know, and all that sort of stuff, I sort of don't really care what the details of this are. I care about it being clear that no one gets onto a board until they are familiar with the guidelines, the procedure, and the mission for their board. And if it's not in writing, all the training in the world isn't going to help, in my opinion. I think there has to be a reference manual. There has to be documentation that people can refer to when there are disputes, because you know there are going to be disputes. There has to be a clear, if not chain of command, at least different spheres of responsibility that are identified and clarified, whether they're staff, whether they're board leadership, whether they're council liaison, whatever it is. Those roles need to be defined and the expectations around them made explicit so that people know who to talk to when they have a question
Right.
or a dispute or whatever.
Right.
So from my perspective, the number one most valuable thing that could be done to make boards and commissions better is to lay all that out in writing in a unified way.
I think that's
I don't
what
say
we're
that's
trying to do.
easy, but it seems to me to be the number one thing that needs to happen so that people's expectations can be met.
Nina, I think that's what we're trying to get to, but we're not there yet. We've got to set up a framework here that says we're recommending that there's centralized staff support. So then if you've got centralized staff support, then that person is the one who's responsible for creating and maintaining an operating manual that is the same for everybody except where it can't be. So you've got chapters 1 through 5 that all are about onboarding. This is how every board works. This is how every board gets in touch with their staff liaison. This is how you get with council. This is how you do XYZ. Then, because you are quasi judicial, this is what you have to do. Because you are solely advisory, this is what you get to do. Because you are this is what you're just whatever, this is how you function. So I think that we're trying to get to there. You just need to, we're trying to move it into these clumps of info. Alan?
On this area here of this category 1 of administrative technology and onboarding, I see two things going on. One being providing appropriate training to staff and procedures, and then the other being tech support. And there are a number of topics related to tech support that we could probably combine into 1 or 2 recommendations. But I think there's 2. It's bifurcated. One relating to staff support with training, and the other being IT. And I don't. And the question is, do we want to combine those or not? I mean, not what we're looking at right now on that page. There's several that relate to IT support.
Right. I agree.
Right.
And I think, question is, how do we combine those in a meaningful way to get our recommendation across?
So, Patrick, can you move all of the ones about tech support together? Or have you done that? Is that what's that?
I can do that. Elise has been consolidating some, but I can help as well.
Okay.
So
I
think Ted had a comment.
Yeah,
Yes,
I just want to say that I do think that tech support and other staff support are 2 distinct things and need to be kept separate. I mean, consolidate the IT support, but
Right.
that's
Yeah,
separate from other staff support.
I agree.
And I do think that we need to also couch the tech support in, and Patrick, you may want to put it up here on this, invest in hybrid meeting technology, number 26, to say that if we are going to do online and hybrid meetings, then it is imperative that we've got to invest in technology and staffing to do that correctly. So, because it all goes back to recruiting. If we want to recruit more people, I think we have to do hybrid. And if we want to do hybrid, we have to make them not frustrating. I mean, I just watched another reparations meeting the other night. Oh my God, that's a disaster. I don't know. If you're not in the room, you might as well just forget about trying to figure out what's going on. So, I think that we need to keep track of that process too. So the hold on one second, Ted. So the top things on this is centralization, staff training, tech support plus, member onboarding, okay, Ted, did you have a comment?
I want to go back to Nina's comment, because I do think, and I'm drawing a blank on whether that recommendation actually is in our recommendations already, but I think it is very important, a very important recommendation that a comprehensive manual be developed that that can be referred to in terms of the governance of all these boards and commissions. So if that's not already a recommendation, I think it needs to be added.
It might be under expectations number 2, category number 2. Let me look. No, formal review. Okay, Patrick, under the operating procedures, that was number 40. I think it's further up. Oh, there it is. Oh, right here. At the bottom, yeah. To include that it needs to be comprehensive, that a comprehensive that involves expectations of member responsibilities. Does that sound right, Ted? Okay, thanks, Elise. Alan, you had a comment?
Yes, look at category number 5. It talks about a board training manual in category 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there, as we go through, and we may find some other areas that are overlap, but category 5 starts out with developing a specific training manual.
Mm-hmm.
Should we move this item down there or move those recommendations up?
Either way,
Let
I
me
didn't
think.
go through all category 5 yet, but
Let's move. Well, increase training.
one, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's
But,
okay.
one of the areas of in category 5 talks about
Officer training.
taking notes so staff members don't have to be fully engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And I put a note in there that AI, if we ever decide to move to AI as the platform, now has Zoom now has a AI component for it for note taking. It was just added recently.
I've meant to try it out on a meeting I was in the other day. Has anybody else tried it yet?
It's supposed to take notes and hold them for 3 days.
Oh.
I haven't tried it yet, but I was part of a Zoom that was actually using it, and I haven't looked at the notes.
Can you do that and just give us a little update, little email update on that?
If you click on Zoom,
Now I want to see an actual meeting that like you
I
participated
think
in.
it's past the 3 days, so the notes are probably.
Oh, okay.
It only, according to Zoom, it only hangs on to the notes for 3 days.
Oh, okay.
Jackson may want to play around with it too.
Yeah.
I've used similar tools. They generally take a transcript and then produce, you can produce different types of summaries from it, like minute style, or like pull out my action items. Depending on the platform, it may or may not do a good job of identifying the speakers. With Zoom, everyone would be logged in and they'd be able to associate the speaker with the name. So should be pretty good in that regard, but obviously it's going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
One of the recommendations that I put in or it doesn't rise to recommendation, but something that I put in the old document was that it might be an interesting experiment or idea to explore, that there may be people in the community that would never join a board or commission because they don't have they don't feel that they have expertise in forestry or transportation, but would like to be of service and maybe would sign up to be a clerk for a board and commission, which could be a non-voting appointment. Someone whose role would be to deal in correspondence, take notes and things like that.
Yeah, I didn't mean to redirect the conversation, but I just wanted to point out that category 5 does cover some of the areas for training.
So Patrick, in answer to your question, why don't you move that up? Did you already, or did you take the other stuff down?
I haven't moved it up, but I can do that.
Okay. Why don't you copy it and put it in both places, just so we know it's there.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, we
Uh-huh.
just had a lot of discussion about training and operating procedures um, and reference manuals, and it seems to me that you can't have training materials without reference manuals. You can't have reference manuals without standard operating procedures. You can't have the procedures without a central accountability.
Without a what?
Accountability, central
Oh, yes.
accountability somewhere in the structure of the government, which you said earlier may exist, but it's just not implemented. But either way, none of those things are doable independent of the others, and they're all sort of reliant on each other. So I just think they should all be lumped together,
Okay.
and that whatever
Good point.
wordsmithing gets done around them to make that point, that they are kind of sequentially rely on each other. You can't do any of them without the other.
Right.
This is, I think, what I was trying to get at.
Okay. Thank you, Nina. Ted, you had a comment?
And yeah, I just wanted to say in terms of the central agency providing accountability, it's not enough just to like exist and expect that everybody's going to know that you're the go-to. That agency has to be proactive. It has to be actively engaged in managing the boards and commissions, not just a passive resource that people may or may not know about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the resource needs to be given the wherewithal to make something happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hold on. I'm doing old school note. Okay, Patrick, can you go back up to the top and let's slowly just scroll down so I can see where we are? Thank you. Okay. 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 Elise?
Is it worth just like hitting these ones that I shaded in green that have the most votes and just saying like, okay, we're all on board with this, yeah, and then let's like kind of move it somewhere else so
Right.
it's
That's
easier
where I'm
visually to see what's going on.
right. Keep going down. Okay, so
And this is the end of section 1 at the end of this table.
okay. Let's highlight this increase in number of IT staff, all those red ones there, and highlight Elise's comments about better staff training and all. Because even though they're not number of votes per se, those tie into what the other big vote getters have said. And so I just want to be sure that our recommendation brings those in to the conversation somehow.
Well, frankly, I would suggest that the two entries following the red ones,
Mm-hmm.
recruit savvy tech volunteers, dedicated staff to tech, they all belong up there too, and that's another 1, 2, 3, 4 votes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. Does anyone object to combining 27 and 45 with this list?
Mm-mm. I mean, I don't object.
I'll get it copied up. You just have to give me a minute.
Okay, that's fine. So are we okay maybe moving on to category 2? Nod your head or wake up. Okay,
I
cool.
just asked on all these IT things.
I'm sorry, what, Ted?
So we're naming all this need for IT,
Mm-hmm.
but do we have like a actual recommendation that all these meetings occur in a hybrid format?
No, but I think it's kind of embedded in there that we are thinking that that's the encouragement that we want, because we've been talking for 2 years about accessibility, and
But will that be in our recommendations?
I think we're one more reading away from that. I hope at our next meeting that maybe we can each take a category and work up the recommendations for that one category and your step down statements also. And that we actually talk the very specific recommendations, starting with the verb, having a goal in there somewhere, some measurable aspect, et cetera, et cetera.
I would say, though, I do want to kind of raise up what Jay just said. I do think that for this item 26, it says invest in hybrid meeting. Everything below that is about supporting that. It does seem what's missing here is like require all meetings to be held in a hybrid format, which is kind of why I voted for 26, but I would prefer to see it listed explicitly.
Okay, put that in parentheses at the end of that statement, please, or add another. Okay, yeah.
I'm just going to note that as new.
Alan, now that all those are combined, the 19, 28, 29, all those, you have 3 votes under that one now. I don't know if you want to triple up on that or if you would like to redistribute one of those somewhere else, one or more of those somewhere else. You don't have to. I just wanted to call your attention to it.
The first one, I think, increase number of IT staff covers several of those. It covers hire additional IT and dedicated staff addressing technical aspects. I think those could be combined. I agree.
Which can you clarify the numbers for me?
19, 28, and
These ones.
9 definitely overlap.
I think the question is how many votes do you want to give to those altogether? Because you've got 3 among them.
I know. I'll go with the first one, increase the number of IT staff.
Well, I think what we're doing is when we combine these like this, while we're listing the votes separately, the idea is we're going to consider this as one thing that we then might clarify and revise. So at some point during or after this meeting, this should kind of collapse to be like,
I agree.
Yeah.
3.
And,
We don't have to do that tonight.
we don't have an election board here. We don't have a Judge Mershon who's checking if our voting methods are fair or not. And nobody's going to try to say at the end of the day it wasn't fair, because we're going to get to all this by consensus. So I think that we all agree that this section is an important section that we want to include, and something's not going to be thrown out because enough of us didn't put our initials next to it. Trust me on that.
I just want to state for everyone's clarity that if your initials are listed multiple times, like say this block here, this is Alan voting 3 times for the broad concept represented by all of these numbered items.
Okay.
And that's how we're getting closer to something that we can, wordsmith and get into the details.
Right.
I don't think we have to do that tonight.
No.
I don't think we'll be able to, but I do think this is progress.
Yes, very much so. Anonymous ferret. What is that?
So just know Google Docs.
Spirit animal.
If you're not logged in, it will choose a spirit animal for you. And yes.
Alrighty then. Okay, are we okay in moving to category 2? I think we've got a lot of feedback and a very good sense of where the group feels about the subject matter in category 1. So category 2 is about culture, participation, expectation, and practices, which none of it can really occur without the stuff that happened before with the operating manual, training manual, that sort of thing. Is kind of in my mind's eye. The culture is a little squishy. Ideally, in just looking at organizational structure and working together better as boards and all, you would wish that every board had the same dynamic, fascinating, energizing, everyone is included and feels like they belong culture, but that isn't going to work. And the two people who control that most are the staff liaison and the chairperson. And one of the things that I just realized that's not on here is we don't address how the chair is chosen in these boards, which we have talked about, but that never really came up in the survey itself. Item that we may want to talk about at another point in time after we've looked at the recommendations.
I'd say also that the issue of standards of ethics is something that's important to board culture. And, it's part of the overarching standard operating procedure thing that everyone agreed to with ethics thing, but it also is extremely important in the context of culture. So I think there's a lot of overlap here about you set the expectations at the very beginning, then they get carried out. And perhaps we need something in here which is about how does someone who's a participant in a board raise a flag, or who do they talk to if they think that the rules are not being followed or the ethics are being breached or something? What's the recourse? What's the standard practice for calling attention to this and seeking a remedy?
Good point. Patrick or Elise, can you add an item up in category 1 that operations manual should have a code of ethics and a whistleblower policy?
Yes, we have an item that talks about ethics somewhere. Let me find it.
I know. I was just getting ready.
It's number 24. Here it is.
Yes, right. Just add whistleblower policy and code of ethics.
Code of ethics was one of the things that was split from when my comment got split.
Yeah, that's where it's going. We got that going.
Yeah, and I'll just note on this topic, something I learned recently is that, there's a citywide ethics policy. Individual boards sometimes have conflict of interest policies that are different, and I'm not even sure which one takes precedent at this point. I think that's addressed
too.
I'm also not sure why they should be different unless they're stricter.
Mm-hmm.
The one I'm talking about is more loose. It's the Downtown Commission has more loose rules than the citywide one, and I'm not sure which one is actually in effect.
Alan?
I had to sign off on a conflict of interest form from the city to be on the civil service board several times already. Every time I got reappointed, I had to sign conflict of interest. City form.
That's civil service. That's a whole.
Yeah, I know, but it was a city. It was a city form. Yeah, not a state form.
Yeah, the Downtown Commission, is that the commission or the ADA, Patrick?
I'm talking about the city commission.
The city commission. Okay.
I'm just noting that the city should, I think, strive to have a single document that applies to all boards, unless there's a very good reason for there to be a difference.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Can I just ask while we're looking?
Just to make a quick comment on that, what you mentioned, Patrick, that it should be the same for all, but perhaps one should exist for volunteer boards, different one for the quasi-judicial, and others that are mandated, which may in fact have subtle differences. I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you were going to say, Patrick?
I was just going to ask while we're looking at section 2, I think Elise has been consolidating some of these, but are there other ones here that we think can be combined?
On the flip side of that, are there any we can throw out? Like, I'm willing to throw out number 32 about asking a question on the application about general availability.
Why don't you put a strike through on that one, Patrick?
It's on category 6, Elise.
I think
No,
so.
number 31, where we were just looking, category 2.
31. Okay.
Just trying to lighten the load a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll strike through. If you submitted one and wanted strike through, I'm happy to do that.
So to reevaluate scheduling, let's put that number 30 goes up with number 56 above. We're talking
tend to
about two
see them
different
as
kinds of
different.
scheduling. Hold on.
Yeah.
We are, aren't we? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's more appropriate that 56 be merged with the one above it, which just provides a platform on which some of the assessment could occur.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
Can I offer an amendment to this strike through of Elise's thing, which is, it seems to me that it.
You went on mute, Nina.
Sorry, an amendment to Elise's thing about availability. It seems to me that it's more important that a board be clear about when it's meeting and what its availability is for hybrid meetings, so that applicants can have, and that there are accommodations available for, say, childcare or whatever other supports we want to offer, so that applicants will know what they're signing up for, how often it's meeting, what kind of meeting it is, what they need to do to be available for that. If you're going to put out a notice asking for people to apply to boards, that information should be available up front for people so they know what they're signing up for. But it should be done also with making clear that there are those available supports for people, whether it's a stipend or if it's childcare or whatever it is that they need help in, or transportation in getting to the meeting or whatever it is. That way,
do any of the boards that y'all serve on have kind of a rotating schedule that in January you meet in the middle of the day, in February you have an evening meeting, or it's always the same bam, 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 bam all the time?
Yes.
And how many of your boards have the ability to provide, when you say provide childcare, are you saying that you give somebody $40 to pay for their babysitter?
I'm saying that those things need to be clear, whatever they may be. We've talked about providing stipends. We've talked about the possibility of, if people need to be on site for a meeting, of having, childcare available in that spot. I mean, there are a number of ways to handle it, but I think the most important thing is that people be aware before they apply about what the expectations are for their participation and what accommodations are available to make it possible.
There's a lot more kind of to that effect in category 6 about better representation and stuff.
Yes.
They're kind of tied together.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the stipends in childcare, well, let's at least repeat it in that category for right now.
I do tend to agree that this is kind of common with 34 and 32 here, this note.
Accommodations, the compensations, right. you know, I will tell you, it would be impossible to provide childcare on site. Let's just go with that. So you'd have to give them a stipend to pay for the babysitter, or
Why is it impossible?
because there's 457 pages of of requirements if you're going to have on-site childcare. It's considered childcare. You can't just hire 2 high schoolers to come and take care of the kids. As much as we would like for it to be that way, we've tried to look at it 49,000 different ways, and it's really impossible unless I can't remember now if the YW still has drop-off service. If they have drop-off service, then you could do that, and there's a small fee for that, and you don't have to be registered in their childcare program to drop your child off there. But that's about the only way you could really do it, other than paying for childcare. I mean, paying their babysitter fee. Or you could convince Werner to stay open, or one of the downtown childcare centers to stay open till 8 o'clock that night, and the kids could come in there and you could have your meeting there. But you can't do it the other way around. Okay. Category 2. So,
How do we feel about striking the staff recommendation for fewer formal meetings?
So how many people realize that when you say more working groups, you don't have staff support when you're a working group? So staff might really like that idea, or to at least maybe put the idea out there that some of this work could be done from a working group instead of always meeting with a quorum in your formal status. Is that kind of where you're headed with that?
Well, staff's recommendation was to have fewer formal meetings and more working groups. I
Yeah.
support more working groups.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily support having fewer formal meetings. I think it's an and, not an or. For example, NAC this year has gone to every other month meeting, and then in the off months, we're encouraged to do our working group stuff, which is great. But I feel like we should do the working group stuff in addition to the regular formal meeting schedule. Like, for example, we're supposed to meet next week. Well, next week on Monday is Memorial Day. So we're actually going to go 4 months between formal meetings. And I think that's a little much, in my opinion.
Yes, you're getting into recreation, parks and rec scenario. Okay.
If I could put like a negative vote against that, I would.
Well, what we
For what
you
it's
say
worth,
that we could utilize the working groups more effectively in order to make the formal meetings less onerous. It may be, and I mean, maybe they're shorter, though. I don't know about y'all, but
here's
if I
my
go to a
problem.
meeting and it lasts 45 minutes, I feel like, well, why did I even come?
Here's my problem with the whole working group thing. The problem with working groups is, are they open meetings? What kind of documentation is happening in those meetings? Does the working group's recommendation basically just get rubber stamped by the full quorum? It has a potential for ending up being effectively a subcommittee that runs the whole show. And I have concerns from a governmental and oversight and accountability perspective with having all the real work done in working groups. I think this is why we have boards, so that they can have these working sessions on the record. So for what it's worth, I'm not a huge fan of the notion of proliferating working groups.
Jack and then Elise.
Well, that's all right. I took my hand down.
Oh, see, no, it's right up here. I see it. Elise.
I understand Nina's concern. I also have seen firsthand how much can get accomplished when you have like a smaller group, and especially because you can expand your working group to include additional members of the public. Like, for example, NAC has a group that is organizing the Festival of Neighborhoods. And so they have recruited a bunch of other people in the community who want to get involved in that, but aren't necessarily on NAC. And then they're able to give a report at the formal meetings. So, I mean, there is like some, I guess, rubber stamping, as you're saying, but the things that come out of the working groups are approved by the full group. Another example, on multimodal, we have a small group of people that's also looking at transit focused interests. And so it's not necessarily the transit committee, that's just a small group of us from MMTC interested in transit. And we had a working meeting that was actually out in a public space instead of instead of virtual. And then the small group of us that were working on transit interests were able to give a presentation to the full group to share some of the things that we had learned. And those things would have not been able to happen if you're trying to get all 9 members like to think about those things during our 2-hour meeting. There's just a lot more opportunity for work to be done. I know, Nina, you're concerned about all of the work being done in working groups, but I do feel from firsthand that there's a lot greater opportunity for things to happen, for ideas to marinate and evolve when you're not just beholden to your 1.5 or your 2-hour meeting once a month.
Thank you, Elise. Ted and Patrick.
Yeah, I just want to say the I-26 Aesthetics Committee has recently explored working group status to in some detail. And there definitely are trade-offs, and particularly with regard to public accountability. And one of the advantages in terms of efficiency and ease of operation of a working group is it is not subject to the Public Meetings Act. And so its meetings are not noticed to the public. The working group can invite whom it wants to participate in the meeting, but the only way that anybody would know that the working group is meeting is through that invitation. So if you are concerned about transparency and public accountability, and I think that may be more important with respect to some boards and commissions than others. But that definitely does need to be taken into consideration and determine, like where the balance in that trade-off occurs.
I was just going to add from another perspective that I tend to feel the city's implementation of working groups versus subcommittees is not entirely clear to staff, to boards. It's not really a label choice you get to make. If you form a working group, there's no open meetings requirements, but you also shouldn't vote to establish it. You shouldn't appoint anyone to it. It's a very informal meeting. And I think that consideration could be put towards when our subcommittees, like small groups, can definitely be an effective way to do work. but working groups aren't the only model. You could do subcommittees. You could also just have board members that hold meetings without any authorization or organization and continue the work that way. But I just think it's important, if we want to dive into working groups more specifically, it is important to consider the legal structure as well, because I don't think that the city always forms working groups without voting on them, without appointing anyone to it. And when you do that, you've actually created a subcommittee, not a working group, regardless of what you choose to call it.
Well, I do have to say that I'm on a working group that has never been officially authorized, and that's the Urban Trail Committee. And we raise money, we get things, repaired, the artwork repaired, we do all of that, but we are not appointed. Just anybody floats in and out. But we didn't realize the whole structure of all this until 6 months ago, and we've been working together for since the 1980s. So I mean, it's just it's a little oddity. So Ted, you had your hand up.
Yeah, we've on the aesthetics committee, we've been very much cautioned in terms of not straying from the Public Meetings Act. I mean, board members can get together as long as they don't form a quorum. But once you form a quorum, even in email exchanges, you violated the Public Meetings Act. So, the subcommittees that we formed have been, it's members below a quorum so that they can function, without every get together being publicly noticed, et cetera. So there are definitely restrictions that need to be abided by. And again, in emails, I mean, we do not reply all, because replying all constitutes a discussion which should be public, and it can't be.
Oh, geez Louise. Seriously.
I
Huh.
would just share, I think this is maybe a separate conversation if we want to get into the weeds on that, but there's definitely several of us who know more than we would like to about open meetings law.
Yes, I see that. One of the things, maybe one of the ways we can address this, Elise, is by saying that somewhere into this recommendation is that once we have reevaluated the usefulness, the effectiveness, the impact that existing boards and commissions have had, are having, will have, need to have, that we always look at those ones in existence, and if we feel that something new needs to be formed, to truly evaluate what is the best model for that particular need. Is it an ad hoc committee? Is it a working group? Is it a subcommittee of an already existing board and commission? Is it advisory? I don't know that it's necessarily really thought out when some of these have been created. Does that make sense? That they have this whole cadre of ways you can get community engagement. Let's make sure we're using the best one for that particular need.
I think what you're describing, Stacy, is what we would eventually develop looking at 36 and 39 on this doc.
Right. I think so too. Okay. Anything else on expectations? There was a comment about if a board member, did we get that into this one? That if a board member is not meeting their membership requirements, that something be done about it. And I don't think any of us.
I believe there's a rule that if someone is not present for at least 75% of the meetings, the body can take a vote to remove them from the board.
Right. Has anybody ever seen that happen?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I've definitely served on boards where a large number of people didn't show up like to any meetings. But my understanding at the time, and maybe it's changed, was that council would have to vote to remove them, so nothing ever happened. Perhaps if boards are actually taking action now, that could be a response to what I experienced.
The example that I'm thinking of was on the transit committee, which is a subcommittee of multimodal. So it might have been the case that transit committee made the recommendation to remove this person, and then MMTC was like the final say.
Right.
Okay. All right. It's 7 o'clock, you guys. Do you want to go through category 3, which is kind of short also?
Before we move on, though, back to 38, whether or not we all agree on the use of the more widespread use of working groups, are we all in agreement that fewer formal meetings is not the answer? Let's get rid of that then.
Fewer formal meetings is definitely not the answer.
Yeah, that was a staff proposal. So like, I'm comfortable saying, no, I'm not for that.
I think we have enough consensus that we want to explore and provide recommendations for how working groups could work, but I don't think the end goal is fewer formal meetings.
No.
Mhm.
Right.
Arguably, more formal meetings might not be a bad idea.
I don't know. That sounds like very few. But it also depends on what the work product is that those committees are expected to produce. Let's see, my feed is getting very unstable.
And Elise, could you just clarify? I know you've been consolidating some of these. Did you make it all the way to the end of the document, or did you consolidate some
I think
but not
so.
all? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right. Thank you. That's fabulous. So the question is, do you want to work on 3 and then we'll be done for the evening? 7 o'clock. And
Seeing some
everybody's
thumbs up.
frozen.
I would just ask that we
Okay.
determine our next meeting date before we go as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so category 3, mutual support with mission and goals. Mainly that it seems that from what the two groups are saying is that there is a very unclear path between members and staff as to what the mission is a lot of times. And so I think it personally, I think it starts with staff to say, this is the mission of what your organization, what your group is supposed to be doing. And then to move forward from that. And if out of that things develop into other goals and recommendations, then you deal with those. But I would say that the mission comes with the statement from council that says we are creating this board or this, and this is their job to do. Alan, you wanted to comment?
Two things that come out of category 3 that come to light for me, and that is the communication of the mission and goals from council, but also that they align, the goals align, the board's goals align with council priorities. And I see some groupings there.
Well, what if it's, so council has their retreat they create their work plan, they create their business plan, whatever you want to call it. And then something comes up subsequent to that meeting that is an issue. Let's just say like George Floyd and riots in downtown Asheville. That wasn't on their radar. So they've got to get, so they decide to have a board get together or a commission get together and decide, how do we handle massive downtown protest? How are we going to handle it as a community? How are we going to handle it from the law enforcement? How are we going to handle it from a safety issue, etc.? So, to council's mission or their top priorities of their strategic plan.
The goals and priorities often come out of their council retreat, though.
Right.
And I think that's where the emphasis should lie, but also we need to look at the UDOs that structured the board or commission initially to make sure there's, if there is a mission statement, that the board or commission is complying with that.
Well, usually what it is, it's when they create the actual board, there will be a mission statement in that
First created, that's right.
that referendum.
Right.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I believe that the first line of this table with 51 and 9, I think, frankly, that's basically the same as number 55 up in category 2. That's, you know, that's part of that whole formal review schedule of every board over the course of 4 or 5 years. It includes a complete review of the mission's effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Patrick, why don't we move the review aspect up to number 2? And then the keep this category 3 as far as how we actually implement these mission and goals, and to keep, and how to stay on track and to stay in the right lane while they're doing it.
That would seem to be covered in the number 6, and even 7.
Yes, it does. Got it.
I'm moving 51 and 9 up.
Okay.
Are we saying another one goes up there as well?
No, we're saying that the main statement for category 3 is number 6, statement 6. Council needs to clearly communicate the mission, goals, directives of the work group, strike team, whatever we want to call it. And again, you know, we've talked about this in the past. A lot of times, well, this will be a pretend thing, but let's say, okay, I joined urban forestry because I want more trees. But at least it's been my observation that since we've had urban forestry, we've cut down more trees than I've ever seen us cut down since I've been here. But, you know, maybe part of their mission is to ensure that we have only healthy trees downtown, and that's not being communicated properly. So we have all these dead trees in town that need to be taken down before we can figure out what to do with the healthy trees. So, you know, I just think that there's a way to better communicate, and then to stay on track, to stay within that lane that's been created by that council resolution.
I could
Go ahead,
comment.
Jay.
So it's the statement that council needs to communicate that we need to have this statement of a mission statement. I've made the recommendation previously and elsewhere that maybe the vehicle for this is that each board and commission ought to have a charter, and that the charter starts from that forming document from council. And so it not only states the purpose of this body's formation, but its structure, how officers are elected, terms, and those kind of mechanics, the ethics or not non-compete. What's the thing we were talking about earlier?
A conflict of interest.
Conflict.
What policies members are subject to, and the charter is different from the manual of how you function, how you do the work of the body, but it states what its mission is, what its authority is, its limitations, and things of that nature.
Do you think that every board and commission has a charter that someone's looked at within the last 5 years? See, I think
NAC has bylaws, which describe much of what I think was just spoken about. And we amended them as recently as a year ago. I'm trying to look up now if MMTC does. I don't know if that's like standard amongst boards and commissions, but I know NAC.
No, I think it's highly unusual that you actually have bylaws. Do you know how they came about?
I do not know. Alan, you were around at the onset of NAC. Are you familiar?
I have a copy of the ordinance that the city council passed in 2012 that established the neighborhood advisory committee, and generally the purpose of the committee, it did not address the bylaws, so that was something that you folks added on later.
Okay, they were in existence before I joined in 2022. So yeah, I'm not sure the origination of them. I know that in the opening segment of the bylaws, it does reference the creating ordinance. But yeah, I guess I'm not sure how those came about initially, and I certainly haven't heard them spoken about in MMTC. So I guess I was just under the impression that all boards had them, or most boards did, but I would definitely support a recommendation to make that standard.
Yeah. The bylaws were one of the first things that we did when the aesthetics committee was formed. I can't imagine an organization operating without them. But I wanted to go back to the alignment of goals with council priorities. Because I think if council is actively engaged in setting in setting the goals, setting the, of the working group, not only initially but on a continuing basis, which I think is what is lacking and what we want to see occurring, then the board goals are naturally going to align with council priorities, and council is going to modify those goals as their priorities change. And the only way that the board goals would not align with council priorities is if the board is going rogue and ignoring what the will of council, in which case there needs to be some intervention.
True. The thought of doing bylaws for all these different boards and commissions is kind of overwhelming.
Well, we did our own bylaws, so
That's a little scary.
Boards and people on boards and commissions should be competent enough to, you know, or write a set of bylaws.
Hold on, Ted. You're getting into my income scenario here, you know. Uh, let's see. Elise, you had a statement. Well, oh, there you are, Elise. Okay.
You know, I think they should probably be provided with some sort of template to start with. But when we amended our bylaws recently, they did get like a quick once over by legal as well. So I imagine that would be part of the process.
Yes, I would hope so. One of the things that's not stated in here also is the council liaison being involved with these boards and commissions, which it sounds like either staff liaisons and maybe it was mentioned a little bit there, but the board members don't seem to realize that they actually have a council liaison also. And, you know, maybe they need to take a greater role in making sure that the alignment of the mission and goals and directives of the boards and commissions is in line with their strategic priorities. And that's something they can talk about before they go to the retreat, not after, so that that board and commission's needs get incorporated into the strategies and goals of the council. You know, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be working. Thanks, Elise. It doesn't seem to be working as far as council liaisons as often as it used to. I mean, Brownie used to come to at least 3 transit meetings a year just to see what we were up to and what was happening and all. And that was very helpful. It helped to move things along more easily because we had an advocate. And then he would get the other folks on the council to vote with him. Okay, it's 7:10. Elise, you want to talk a second?
Just regarding staff liaisons, it really depends on the council member. Councilmember Roney shows up to
No, that's true.
basically every NAC meeting. Councilmember Ullman has showed up to almost every MMTC meeting. It really just depends.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that input. Okay. So we could do this one of 2 ways. We could meet again very soon and talk about the remaining categories. And then after that meeting, and that should be, there's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 6 more, but they're short. But knock those out. And then each of us take a category and write the recommendation for that category, along with any step down recommendations that we feel are part. Or we can go ahead and start working on the 3 category. Well, no, I don't think so, because some of the things that are in the subsequent categories might get pushed up into the 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so let's have another meeting soon and deal with the rest of the categories and then get our category recommendation writing assignment. What do you think? Okay. When can you meet? I will be out of town from the 30th through the 8th.
I have out of town guests from the 13th through I think around the 18th or so.
That's in June.
Yeah, June.
Okay. Let's see. Memorial Day is Monday. Ooh, I've got 4 meetings.
Elise just put in the comments June 10. I was going to suggest as well. June 10th.
I can't. What was the comment? I'm sorry, I missed it.
The 10th of June.
June 10th. That's what I was going to say too. Are y'all, I don't have anything on that date. You ready for June 10?
Can do that. Can we just get thumbs if that works for everyone who's here?
Maybe.
Thumbs, maybe. Okay.
Works for me.
Okay.
I'm not hearing anyone saying no, so that's a good
That's
sign.
good. Appreciate it.
Amazing, actually.
Okay.
And I would just say in the meantime, like, I'm going to make sure that I have my votes considered and logged before we meet next. I'd encourage anyone else that hasn't had a chance to do that to do the same. And if there's any specific topics that require that, like, are something that would take up a lot of time at a meeting, like how working groups should look and all the considerations there. If anyone has the bandwidth and interest, I just encourage you to start a Google Groups post or an email thread so we could see if we can get to consensus, outside of these meetings, or at least get an idea on the table that we can debate.
Okay. Sounds good. Y'all, thank you so much. I think we got a lot done tonight. Any comments or ideas for the next meeting, send them to me, and we'll go from there.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Stacy.
Have a nice holiday weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
You too.
Okay,
We've
bye-bye.
taken a lot of information. It's getting smaller.
Bye, all.
So
It is getting smaller. Yay. Yay, yay, yay. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.